humans are not making small problems anymore, right? That is just not what we do. We only make huge, complicated, very difficult challenges. This new information landscape that we find ourselves in is unlike anything that we were ever trained for. And it was unlike anything that our brains have ever evolved to manage. We're living through an extraordinary era of choice inflation, where people are being asked to make way more choices that are way more taxing. We get in this pattern of exhausting ourselves, this decision fatigue with how many choices we have to make, and that leads us to make poorer and poorer choices. All of these choice tech tools, these information technology tools, they are just that. They are just tools. They are not your life. They are everywhere, and they do have potential, but they don't have to be anything. And that what is most important is who you want to be and how you want to live and what relationship you want to have with these tools, not the other way around.
Emily, good evening on my side, good afternoon on your side. Welcome to the Whereabouts Tales podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Today, I have the honor to speak with Emily Pabst. Is it Pabst or Pabst? Pabst.
Both, yeah.
Okay, now you have to explain. Why both?
Well, I mean, I'd say most people say a Pabst. I say a Pabst, but like Popst is something that I register and recognize too. I'd say it's a common accented pronunciation of the name.
Okay, I think it's depending to the person sitting in front of you and their origin. How do they decide to read it? Emily is the founder of Remake The Rules, where she helps people rethink how they make decisions in a world full of noise. And we'll get a bit more into that topic later. But first, Emily, I would like always in this podcast, I would like to know you first. And first of all, I'd like to ask you, where are your whereabouts?
Sure. Well, right now I live outside of Denver, Colorado, part of the Denver, Colorado metro area. So Colorado is a state in the United States that's kind of western, middle, and the Rocky Mountains are there. It's pretty well known for skiing and snowboarding and winter sports, which I don't really partake in, but I live here anyways.
That's cool. Where are you originally from there, or you moved there?
I moved here. I've been here for maybe 12 or 13 years now, but I'm originally from a medium-sized town right in the middle of Missouri, which is a state in the United States that is like the middle of the middle of the middle.
Would you mind saying the name of the state? Of the
Sure.
of the city,
Yeah,
not of the
it's
state, sorry.
Columbia, Missouri.
No idea. I tried.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When I have traveled before and met people and talked to people, it's always lovely to engage with folks, but inevitably the question comes up like, where are you from? And I, over the years, I've kind of tried different strategies, right? I'm like, oh, I'm from, let's see, do you know where Chicago is? And folks are kind of like, kinda. And I'm like, well, I'm like 600 miles from there, right? Yeah.
Do you know where Chicago is? That not from there.
Yeah, no. I did, though, funnily enough, I went to grad school in Kansas, which is nearby. And so there was a time in my life where people say, where are you from? And I say, Kansas. And overwhelmingly, people from all over the world would say, oh, Wizard of Oz. And I'd be like, oh, yes, yeah, Wizard of Oz, yeah.
Dorothy.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a cultural problem with Wizard of Oz, and I want to go on this rant now because I keep discussing with my work colleagues. I live in Germany at the moment, but I keep discussing with my work colleagues about Wizard of Oz. And it took me a while to explain them what Wizard of Oz is. And
I mean, it's amazing, like, how pervasive the Wizard of Oz is across the world, apparently. I mean, not everybody knows about it, but I was really surprised to learn that was like a cultural touchstone that so many people were aware of about the United States. Yeah.
And now I have to go in another small detail. Do you know that the sound of music? So I think a movie that almost everyone knows on the face of this earth is not known in Germany at all.
Wow.
Because the family inside the Sound of Music is of a former Nazi officer, and that's why they never. I think they played it once, but they was never on TV.
I mean, I could definitely see how the sort of glorification of that story and the whimsy of it is a little different, for different folks.
Exactly, yeah. But it was a fun fact for me. I'm sorry for the rant. How was Emily? How was growing up in a small city in the mid of the U.S.?
Yeah, it was lovely, and also both sort of like kind of exactly what you might be imagining and nothing at all like what you might be imagining. I grew up in sort of a mid-sized city that also was the university town for like the entire state. So the big college was there. There were two other universities that were there, two colleges, one university that was there. And so even though we were kind of in the middle of what would be largely agricultural, there was this very large cultural hub that even had a pretty large international population. So that was kind of my experience once I left the city and started going to college in the United States, meeting more people. I've only ever lived in the United States, but that as I was sort of describing what my Missouri experience was like to people, they would be like, "Oh, that is not the stereotype I was expecting," and it's kind of both. It's both the middle of the middle of the middle, but also this sort of interesting aspect of being a really large university town.
I want to ask you about the community, but as it was not such a small town, I would guess that the community was more related to your neighborhood. But still, I would like to ask you, how was because I keep telling this story until someone will get bored, but I read Michelle Obama's book and she said that I was raised by the neighborhood. So everyone on my street knew me and knew my name and knew who was my father and my mom, and they would call me and tell, Michelle did this. And was it the same feeling in your city? Like you had the feeling that you know everyone from your neighborhood?
Not, I would say that wasn't my experience. Though, so where I lived, a lot of the properties nearby were rental properties, which usually means that folks will stay there maybe for a handful of years, maybe just 1 year, but not a lot longer than that. So my family was in one of the sort of owned homes in the neighborhood. So we were there. We lived there almost my entire life, and or my entire childhood, I suppose. And so it was interesting that like the place is very near and dear to me, and the place really raised me, but the people maybe weren't as consistent. If that makes sense. So there certainly was some changeover. Yeah, right. But at the same time, like I changed a lot during those 18 years too, right? So I definitely remember, I'm an elder millennial, so I like remember when the first personal computer was brought into our home, right? And but I also remember riding bikes in the streets with all of the other young kids. And then, having to like rush home when the streetlights started coming on because you have to be home by when the streetlights are on, right?
I come from Romania. We had not that many street lights, and besides that, I was allowed to stay home, stay outside until it was dark because we haven't had any lights. That's why. But it's funny that we are a combination of both words. Now that you said it, I realize it's like we are able to use a computer, MacBook, call it however you want, but we are able to use it. But we also know how it is to ride a bike and have your knees completely covered in blood, or because of the falling with the bike and so on. That's an interesting thing that I have to say it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Or learning how to drive and navigate without any navigation tools other than a paper map. Talk about a different experience.
driving with the bike also over the hill and being able to come back without your phone telling you how to come home.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and being afraid to come home, like you said before, being afraid to go home because nobody had the possibility to call you, and the only moment in which you get your punishment, like your lesson, was when you were coming home, and that's why you were postponing as long as possible that moment, even though you could not make it better. But cool. When do you remember the first personal computer entering your home?
I could not tell you the age. I definitely was in elementary school, which is sort of
Mm-hmm.
up through the age of 10 or 11 in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it was probably a single digit age, and it was an old Tandy, if that is meaningful to you at all. It had the green screen.
Yes.
And I played a game on it where like a little stick man fell from the sky and landed in a wagon. And that was like thrilling, absolutely thrilling.
I had the one with the lines. You remember, with the lines and the ball moving in the between the lines, so there was a
Oh, yes.
computer.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember the name of it, but
Thrilling.
abs- nothing better.
Yeah.
I one of my friends had there was actually a Romanian computer, as far as I remember, was an HC90, and the only way in which you could load games was with tapes, like with cassette,
Yeah.
because there was a sound coming from the cassette, and we had to wait 6-7 tapes until they loaded the game, and they had an error at 95%. They had to start from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Magic.
Yeah, I remember the big floppy disk. That is like as far back as my like utility goes. Yeah. Yeah.
3.5, I think it was called.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
cool. No, we are not old. No, we just read a lot on the internet about
Yeah.
all those informations.
Just watching a lot of nostalgic television. Yeah.
When was the moment, or let me ask you in a different, what kind of kid you were?
What kind of what? Kid?
What kind of kid you were? Yeah.
I am the youngest of four. And so I think that impacted me a lot. That I was, kind of this like independent little roamer, right? And I think there was a combination of growing up pretty quick because I was learning so much from my older siblings. But also just like, and now that I'm older, right, I can like really better appreciate the sort of like exhaustion that my parents must have felt, by the time four came around, right? That's just like, you know what? It seems like you're doing a good job of managing yourself, and I'm just going to let you by all means, right? Yeah. So I was given a lot of independence, and I loved it. Yeah.
That's what made you questioning the rules somehow from that age, or give you the freedom to do that?
I think so. Yeah. I think this is like what I do now is so much a part of who I am, and this idea of the independence. Like independence can be wonderful, and there can be a lot of freedom in that, but also there's a lot of responsibility and requirement to figure out what's going on. This sort of like lack of guidance or control or kind of whatever flavor that shows up in. It does mean that you are kind of figuring it out. And I think that I happen to take a fair amount of pleasure in that. So that's really good. That was very lucky for me. Yeah.
Would you call it a kind of a street smart?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I see that you directly understood. I mean, this idea of thinking outside of the rules and think how can you solve the problem without considering the rules. Like, let's see what we can do to solve it. And I think that's something that we got a lot in that age. And I thought it was only from Eastern Europe, as I'm coming from there, but I see not. It was an age thing, most probably.
Yeah, potentially. And I think you're probably right that this is kind of an interesting crossroads with folks that, right, and now this is all hindsight that we're thinking about this, but that we have this sort of increased sort of pressures and responsibilities on adults in the family unit, while you also are sort of like pre-tech / tech is coming in, and you've got a lot of folks like this is where we really are turning a corner, especially when it comes to technology and the way in which that like digital technologies, computational technologies have really changed our lives and have really changed how we think and how we live. And that we have been sort of on this long arc that has brought us here to 2025 of these big changes and just having to figure it out. Yeah, figure it out.
Everybody's winging it, so we have to try as well. Everyone has to find their way. Do you have kids, Emily?
I don't have
You
kids.
don't. Okay, that's I have a small boy, and that's one of the things that I'm struggling the most with to find the break-even point between pampering him and giving him the freedom to do whatever I have done, because I realize more and more that even in school they have this crazy care of having this closed circuit. Nobody's allowed to get in. They don't get any connection with the outside of the school, and this is something that kind of scared me for the real world, because this attitude of, come on, nothing can happen, nothing bad can happen, just play calm. This is something that you actually need when you go out of that bubble in school.
Yeah. It's like I don't have kids myself, but I have a ton of like empathy and curiosity about like those questions exactly, because I think that we are not living in the world that any of us grew up in, right? And so even the lessons that we may have been able to learn within our own childhoods and development, and even as adults who are preparing for adulthood, responsibility, parenthood, whatever, if those lessons were learned 10 years ago, then we also have a problem, right? Exactly. Yeah. It is tough out there.
I keep saying that besides the basics of, I don't know, do not steal, do not kill, do not like the basics, everything else is subject to change. Like really everything else is subject to change. My favorite one is this, if we talk about the food industry, I think 30 years ago, nobody said anything about sugar and everyone was talking about fat. Since 10 years ago, now everyone is talking, no, you should give fat to the kid because the brain is only made from fat, but you should not give him sugar anymore because sugar is bad. And this is just a small example. This is something that came from the top of my head, and I'm talking a lot with my wife about this, and it's a, you cannot, there is, so they don't come with they unfortunately they don't come with a user's manual. There is no user's manual. There is no introduction in parenting. I love people giving lessons how to raise your kid without having a kid. I love them.
Yeah. And another thing. Yeah.
I love them. I just love them. You have no idea. I don't go into detail. And every small detail that you can think about, and it's incredible how much they are copying you. And I think the one thing that my son will be 7 in September, so I'm still young in this role and I'm still learning, and most probably I'll know everything by the time he's 18 and he left the house. But the only thing that I can say it's practice what you preach, because he doesn't listen to what you're saying. He's watching what you're doing. And if you want him to, I don't know, do sports, you have to make sports before him. If you want him to behave, you have to behave in front of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting world. It's an interesting world also with with social media. It's an interesting world also with the devices in general, with the screens. There are so many split opinion about the screens and about the devices, and nobody actually know what exactly are the long-term effect, because everything it's a supposal. Yeah, we can think that it can be that, but we have no idea.
Yeah, we don't know because the time hasn't passed yet. Exactly. We are like all live experimenting on ourselves as we go, and we're gonna see.
And you know what's fun, Emily, that I think it will take another at least 100 years to find out, because by the time we get some experience with the devices from today, there are new devices coming up, and you don't get to actually work out and make some real experience with something. But yeah, I read an study about smoking that was done in a village in somewhere in Russia for about 45 years. You cannot even do that anymore, because now there are different kind of cigarettes coming out every month. So
Yeah, and like such kind of what you're saying, like with that example, with the example of like what are we even supposed to eat? You know, it's so interesting how like science moves at a pace, right? And it is a pace that is significantly slower than how now, with all of our technology tools, we can communicate with each other, right? And that disparity, that discrepancy is definitely causing us a lot of heartache right now. Yeah. So we're kind of finding ourselves in these like huge information cycles, these huge like waves of ideas where they can happen so much more faster than new knowledge, right? Not just information, but new knowledge can be gained. And that we're just kind of trapped in that, right? Like these crashing waves, like, oh no, I gotta eat totally different now. I've been doing it wrong forever, you know? And it's a tough position to be in. Yeah.
but we are winging it.
Yeah, we sure are. And I think that there's, you know, one of the things I try to bring to people when we have these conversations, and unfortunately, like, this is not about easy answers. Like, I tell folks, like, humans are not making small problems anymore, right? That is just not what we do. We only make huge, complicated, like, very difficult challenges. And because of that, the scale of the solutions is also going to have to be really big. But as individuals, it can include understanding the environment for what it is, right? Kind of seeing these big patterns and how they are enacting upon us as individuals, upon our culture and societies, and what they are doing and what they really mean, though, right? So this idea of sort of separating what is happening informationally with what is happening scientifically is maybe a baby step to like reframing really what's going on and really kind of what we're encountering through these supercomputers that we all carry around in our pockets. Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a moment where we are able to use the progress of technology to increase the speed in the progress of science?
I think that is already happening. Yeah.
Not on a pace where we would all be happy with, to be honest.
Oh, sure. I mean, we're not catching up to the problems that we're making, right? You know, but
I've seen a picture a few days ago. I've read an article, I think, in the New York Times, if I remember it correctly, and they said that ChatGPT found on an X-ray a small dot, and it identified to be a future breast cancer, and it discovered it before it could evolve. That's what AI should be used for, not to create pictures of Trump hugging Musk.
Yeah. So great potential, right? Like it is a tool with extraordinary potential. And then it just comes down to how we choose to use it and how we choose to incorporate it into our lives and our cultures and our societies. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Emily, in one of your previous interviews or podcasts, because I have my notes done through all of them, and I don't remember if it was an interview or the podcast, but you said that you like, you are drawn to art that upsets your brain.
does sound like something I would say. Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that's a native curiosity that it's triggering you there?
I think what I love about art that upsets my brain is the same thing that I also enjoy being proven wrong. Because what it does for me is reminds me of how much more possibility and expansiveness there is outside of my own brain. And, that even though myself is how I experience the world and who I am, and I love all of those things, there really is so much more. And at the end of the day, um, what I know and what I experience and what I can understand and process is very limited. So the fact that there is so much more and that I can keep encountering that so much more is a real pleasure. Yeah, so I love weird art. Like the weirder the better. Yeah, anything that kind of twists my brain up. Big fan.
You said to read the complete quote. You said, "I enjoy caves, limericks, water slides, and art that upsets my brain."
Yeah, all those are true. Yeah.
I loved it, and I said I have to take this. I love the fact that you said that you like someone challenging you and showing you a different point, like giving you a different perspective of what you said. I think that's the base. The discussions with people that we don't agree with are the ones that bring us further, because we are able to experience a different opinion, and we are able either to challenge it somehow with our opinion, either to accept it as the new opinion. But you need a lot of, I would say, a lot of character to be able to accept the fact that you are wrong.
Yeah. I think I also think of it as flexibility. Kind of going back to what you were talking about with your kid, right? And how perceptive they are and how much, they're watching you, and that is sort of creating the person that they are. We're all like that, right? Like the difference between who we are and the environments that we are in is really not that different. That we just become some sort of synthesis of all of the information that we encounter and that we process. And kind of understanding that there is incredible variability in people's experiences, and that we are incredibly good at adapting to that variability just means that you are going to have people who are operating with completely different rules for very good reasons. Yeah. And so I think kind of having that flexibility of mind is kind of helpful in being able to reorienting to this idea that a person isn't who they are for no reason, right? A person becomes who they are for usually very good reasons. And kind of exploring it from that perspective, I usually enjoy.
Do you usually think that we are developed or not developed only because of the people that we sit around with?
I think that our brains are very much attracted to other humans and what other humans do.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely does occupy like a really powerful space for us. But it really is our entire environments too. Yeah.
Makes sense.
And this is like where a big turn has occurred for us. Like it used to be that our environment was needed to be physically near us for us to sense it, right? And that's no longer the case anymore. Like our environments are potentially as expansive as the internet.
I love the fact that we are able to do this, and I love the internet because we are able to do this, what we are doing now. But we have a few thousand miles between us, and we have this conversation, which is amazing. But on the other side, it's sad when you do this and you are in the same city, or maybe you are a few kilometers away because of the comfort of leaving your nest. And I think this is something, you are right, I think this is something that we got used to maybe a bit too much in the last period, and we really don't know how to navigate the change yet.
I mean, how could we really?
No.
Yeah, because this is something so new for everyone. Like we are learning it right now. Yeah.
Emily, so you moved, you studied in your hometown, as far as I understood, and then you moved for work, or you moved for study, for
For
studying,
study. Yeah.
for studying. Where have you moved?
So I left my hometown to go to university in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado. So that is the first time I kind of ended up where I live now and why I eventually came back here. But before I kind of settled down here, I was back in Missouri for a while after college, and then I went and got a master's degree in Kansas, Wizard of Oz, of course, as we all know. And then I eventually made my way back to Colorado.
Cool. What kind of what roles have you held before launching Remake the Rules?
Say it again.
What jobs, what roles have you had before launching Remake the Rules?
Sure. Well, I have pretty much always worked in public service, so for government agencies. That's something that was a big part of my family growing up, and is definitely something that I just pursued because of that, I think. And so I worked in a court system in Missouri, so part of actually an alternative sentencing court. So it was seeking better options for people with mental health disorders, traumatic brain injuries, and then addiction issues that were more about resolving those underlying problems than about sort of punitive, um, like jail time or what have you.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, I went and got my master's degree in geography. So after that, I ended up doing redistricting for the state of Kansas. So I can do a crash course in redistricting. Yeah, okay. um, so essentially, redistricting is about how people in the United States vote. The idea is that every person should get the same, like one vote, one person, one vote. So my vote should be worth the same amount of vote as everyone else's vote. But because people are dispersed differently all over the country, the way that they draw sort of the voting district boundaries needs to take account of this. So it's essentially how like you determine where a voting district is. So where my representative. So if we have a representative that is in Congress, they should represent about the same number of people as another representative. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
does not now it makes sense. And is the same for the presidential elections?
So it does matter for the presidential elections because it's by electoral college, which is yes, yeah, right.
But it's not the same. So representatives are not the same. They are more than the electors in the electoral in voting for the president, right?
Like kind of how they would relate with each other is that there's only so many representatives. And so every 10 years, depending on how many people are in each state, they allocate the representatives to each state.
Okay.
So, like, if one state's population goes up a lot and another state's population goes down a lot, one can gain a representative and one can lose a representative.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's changing.
Yes, it can change. Mm-hmm.
Emily, you raised my curiosity. I'm a US fanboy. I have to say
Oh,
that.
okay.
I've said this several times. And I read a lot about the US elections because I think it's an interesting process,
Mm-hmm.
which is old in some cases, but I think it's still the best democracy in the world. And it's the only democracy that was never a imperium or a dictatorship. And I think it has a lot to do with the election process because it's made so complicated so that nobody can easily go around it. And I
Yeah.
was always fascinated about this, but I didn't know that you are able, so you are switching the representative. That's something really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you love math and you love like American politics, get into elections because they're very interesting. Yeah. So like the state that I live in now, Colorado, actually gained a representative during the last like sort of census cycle when they determine all of these things. So not only did the population inside of the state change around, right? So then you have to sort of move districts to make sure you have the same number of people or near the same number of people in each district, but they even added one. So now you got to redraw like all the boundaries to figure out what representative is going to be representing which people.
And how often is this process done? Because I would guess it's a continuous process in which you do the calculations and so on, but you still have cutoff times, right?
So it actually is done once every 10 years. So the United States does a census where they actually try to count every single person in the country every 10 years. They do things in between. The American Community Survey is what it's called. So they still are collecting data to understand the people in the country. But the census is where they try to literally count everyone. And then based on that data, they're able to say, okay, how do these representatives get dispersed? Essentially. And then now that we have as good a snapshot as we're going to get of where everybody lives, we can start drawing these boundaries.
Oh my God, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Emily, I
agree.
I honestly want to grab a promise from you that we're able to do one episode about the system because I'm fascinated about this.
I can talk about this for days.
So honestly, I'm more than open. If you are open and you have the time, let's do it. Try to do it in the next weeks because I love the topic. I'm fascinated about the U.S. elections because they are so interestingly done. I always watch this. Calling from the TV stations, like when they call the state for a certain president, because they said, okay, this I managed to learn by seeing a lot of them and reading a lot of about them, but I never get to see someone to explain the process like this. This is bloody interesting.
I've been out of the game for a while, but I am happy we can still get into it. Yeah.
Okay, I got that promise. I will get in contact with you after this. I love it. Cool. So you did how did you call it?
Redistricting.
Mm-hmm. Redistricting, exactly. Why did you left? It's so amazing.
Well, it is mostly because it's only done once every 10 years, right?
Yeah. I can imagine that. And after that, after redistricting?
After that, I moved again, this time kind of my last move to Colorado where I am now. And I got a job working as a data analyst with the city and county of Denver.
Okay, so still working somehow for the state institutions.
Exactly.
Did somehow the strict rules that you had in these jobs made you go towards rethinking the rules and remaking the rules?
I think I have always had a strong, or as long as I can remember, I've had a very strong interest in rule making and rule breaking, right? That most, like any social rule that we are participating in, be it judicial, be it legislative, be it criminal, that they are ones that are socially constructed. And there are points in which they are empowered and followed. And then there are points in which they are not, right? And people start departing from that. And this sort of dynamic, this sort of soft structure of these rules has always been very interesting to me, and how they can become very rigid and very powerful, and then also very not. So that's kind of how I sum up my interest and how I kind of got pulled into the work that I do and into the conversations that I have, is this sort of individual rulemaking and rule breaking, this societal level rulemaking and rule breaking and sort of how we construct these ideas and these rules for ourselves and how powerful they can be on our choices and our behaviors, and then how sometimes they can just disappear, and what that means too. Mm-hmm.
Interesting point of view, because you would think that in your, like you said, you worked a lot in the government and you think you have a lot of power to change things, but at one moment you realize you don't. Like you are constricted by different rules that someone made a few time ago. I would just say it without mentioning the time. But um, do you think that everything that has to do with the government is something that it's a hard process to be changed?
Often, but that isn't always a bad thing either. Yeah. I think that when so separate from the idea of whether or not an institution is acting well with and on the people, right? Because absolutely, often, sometimes they do not. And that there are big problems in acting very problematically upon the people, and they can also be acting very positively on the people. But also, there is a lot of sort of stability and intermingling that's going on with these institutions too. So they just tend to be these really powerful forces in a community. And because of that power, they absolutely should be able to change. They should absolutely be able to improve. And there really needs to be structures in place to make sure that they can do that and they can do that well. But also, if those institutions can change on a dime, then who's to say that that major change is for the positive, right? It can absolutely be for the negative too. So while the institutional inertia can absolutely be very frustrating, I also think that these are huge boats, right? And big boats do not turn quickly. And there can be pros and cons to that.
It's always depending on where the power is. I think
Yeah.
that's a fair point. Saying that it's better to have it hard to change it, because it's always a problem when the power is in the wrong hands and they have the power to do the things that were done before. I think that's an important point that we have to keep in the back of our mind. Do you think that the rules from the government institutions are made in the favor of the citizens or against them? And what I mean by against them, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Emily. But I usually have the feeling, and this is an European experience, less a US experience, is that every rule that is made, it's making for you as the citizen a bit hard to access that institution, to contact that institution. This is my feeling, and is made more in the advantage of the person working there, because he has a lot on his mind and he has to somehow protect himself.
I mean, I think that anytime like boundaries and power dynamics are established, that folks are going to build them to some advantage and to some's disadvantage, right? Yeah. And which again is why it's incredibly important to try to make sure that we have systems in place that do not allow for an overwhelming advantageous system for some and an overwhelming disadvantageous system for others. And, certainly the United States has a long history of providing great advantage to some groups of people and great disadvantage to some groups of people, which is something that we still have huge problems attempting to resolve and extract and to minimize the harms of those systems. And yes, right. That is how these power structures work and are built, and they are capable of great potential for both harm and for good.
We always come back to the addictiveness of power somehow, and how that can influence our life. It's so interesting, but they are absolutely right. It's
Yeah.
it's a big risk that we have there, and we have to be aware of.
And I think, my background in data analysis, a lot of the questions when you're working inside of these institutions is what are they doing? How are they working, right? I kind of worked in like an operational administrative capacity. And those are really big questions that it is very important to ask, and to ask well, and to answer well. Yeah. So that is definitely where my big interest in sort of the information of it all, right? And now that we have these big, powerful tools that can help us with all of this data collection and computational processing to get a different lens into. Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't have been the result of the Department of Government Efficiency. It should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
yeah.
Absolutely. Because you have the numbers, like you said, you have the numbers, you have the data, you have the possibility to gather the data, you have the possibility to gather conclusions from the data.
Mm-hmm. And right, and like this is kind of where I made my turn for the work that I do now, which is what I was seeing, was that very smart, very reasonable, very well-meaning people, right? Which is the best case scenario, and that is not always the case. That the information tools that we were building were outpacing people's abilities to really use them, to incorporate them into their decision making, right? I mean, again, these are very smart, very well-meaning people. This is the folks that I work with, but this new information landscape that we find ourselves in is unlike anything that we were ever trained for. And it was unlike anything that our brains have ever evolved to manage. So trying to figure out really how to ingest and process this amount of information in my own human brain, right, in a way that will allow me to make better and better choices, to ask better and better questions. It's very challenging.
I think the critical part is to build a relational connection between the data, to relate them somehow, to understand what's connected with what and why. And I think because of the amount of data that we are getting today, I think it's hard to put it in an Excel file to make it.
For sure. And this is like the meaning making of it all is kind of how I refer to that, right? And it's not just the meaning so like when you go way downstream on these processes, the meaning making is essentially like what you care about, right? Which is maybe the choices your employees make is what you're attempting to figure out. And if they're making the quote unquote right choices. And then you have this data processing system that is documenting probably not that, but maybe something close to it that now we're treating as that, right? And there's a lot of organization that can absolutely be done super well, and it can absolutely be done not very well. and then it's being presented to folks who are supposed to use it to make some really impactful and important decisions. And you better hope that everything is working good by the time it gets up there.
What was that aha moment when you realized there is this need that you can cover?
I had it kind of grew over time. I don't know if it was a single moment, but I think, I kind of had it twofold, where it was happening to me in my professional life, right? Where I was kind of the person who was bridging between these information tools that were being built and the folks who were needing to use them to make choices. So kind of in both having the like very hands-on experience of understanding those systems and also understanding the needs of the folks who were asking for them, right? So the team that was building and the people that were using. But then also just watching the rest of human existence as it was happening in the 21st century, right? That I did online dating for many years, and a bunch of my friends did and still are. And watching sort of these same patterns of frustration come out of just a lack of reorienting to this problem of how do we get our human brains to collaborate effectively with these, what are at the end of the day, dating app or otherwise, very powerful information tools. That is sort of like how I essentially just started in literally daily conversations, sort of talking people through like what that information really was and how it got there and what its limitations were and whether or not the assumptions they were making about it were likely to be true or not. This sort of holistic, probabilistic thinking that we now have to bring to our daily decision making, right? Yeah, which I'm now trying to bring to whoever has an information tool, and they're like, why is it not giving me what was promised to me? I was told that this information tool would give me everything that I need to get what I want. And so frequently that is not the case.
You said that we keep optimizing, but we never stop to ask who are we optimizing or designing the systems for. And I think that's an amazing statement, which fits exactly what you were saying, because I think the difference between what the computing system is giving you as a result of data and what the end user is expecting, it's a huge gap. And I think translating that message, at the end, it's a translation that we would need to have. And I think if you manage to cover this with Remake the Rules, I think that's going to be a money printing machine in the nearest future.
If I can somehow get a simple solution to one of the hardest problems we've ever created.
No, but still you are on that pattern.
Yes.
Emily, you talk about optimization fatigue. How did Remake the Rules become your answer to the cultural pressure?
I think, like for me, Remake the Rules is about understanding that we essentially live in a dynamic landscape with a bunch of pressures that were not designed for us individually in mind. So they might not work very well for us, or they might actively be working against us, right? And absolutely, there are a lot of powers from these information technology tools that I do think have a lot of positive potential, but they are not about us, and they are not about the positive potential that I can achieve. Dating apps is like a really good example, right? I think that they can be great and that folks can absolutely use them to great effect, but that they aren't really designed to actually get people what they want, which is high compatibility relationships with people. So kind of one of the things I tend to talk about a lot is that the information within dating app profiles does not actually tell you anything about that, right? It does connect you with people. It does give you some information that may or may not be true, right? But really, it's about quantity and access. And it does those things really well. But it doesn't do the compatibility really well, right? The actual sort of complicated social desired outcomes that people are looking for.
But don't you think it has a part of input problem? Because like We usually call it shit in, shit out.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, now we talk about the dating apps. I think people are feeding a narrative there. I love to read a lot. I love to spend time watching the sunset on the beach on a Tuesday morning. And I think a big part of it is still our fault in translating not what we want to have, but or not what we are, but translating what we want to be.
Or not even that, what we think other people want us to be, which is
Exactly.
probably both wrong, honestly.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Completely agree. Yeah. And this is where that sort of optimization issue, right? So that is what I would say is happening there too, that folks are saying, they think my problem is not enough people are saying yes to me, right? Or swiping right to me.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that I need to present myself in a way that optimizes the number of people that say, yes, I want this person. I want to match with this person.
It's a matter of numbers, not of quality.
Exactly, right? Which then just leads to everyone being super frustrated that they're now spending a bunch of time interacting with people that they don't get along with, right? But, it's like, okay, well, let's back it up a little bit. Let's see how we got there, right? And this is sort of the mindset shift that I work with people, but it's based in these information dynamics, right? That like what you are doing is actually setting yourself up for a worse situation because now you have a larger pool of people who are less compatible with the outcomes that you want. So you're just creating sort of more informational labor for yourself, which is already the problem that we have. So we're just kind of exacerbating that same issue.
So we are, yeah. I think the focus on quantity over quality, it's something that we have it as an issue in the society at the moment because we do that in mostly everything. And I think absolutely right. You are not focusing on having that perfect match of 1-to-1. You want to have that match of 1-to-many so that you can choose again because you don't really know what you want.
Yeah. And in some cases, there is power in volume, but it is not the solution to every problem. And actually, like where the power in volume comes from is the capacity to then distill valuable information from that, right? So again, the dating app is doing that pretty good, especially depending on what your sort of locational dating app culture is, right? If most people are using the same dating app, if you live in a large city, that can be access to a ton of people. But if you are just maintaining that volume, it's nothing to you, right? It's not giving you anything meaningful.
If you would have to put it in, let's say, one sentence, what do you say the mission of Remake the Rules would be? More than one sentence. I don't want to keep you straight. But...
Thank you. I really want to. So there are so many large institutions, governmental, for-profit companies, whatever, who are able to have big data teams, folks like me who are really taking strong advantage of information dynamics, information science, decision science, and creating a lot of profit from it, right? A lot of hopefully societal benefit from it, depending, ? Right? Exactly. Yeah. And that's something that, in my capacity as a public servant, I was proud to work on for many years. But I got to a point where I kind of wanted to shift the access to this skill set, this like reframing, to be more accessible to more people, right? To work on problems that were just as impactful to people's lives. Like I do still work on really big projects with executive leadership teams, but the online dating is still really important to me because for most people, who they choose to invite into their life is the most important decision they'll ever make in their life, right? Who we choose to be with tremendously impactful. And it is now so complicated by this like informational landscape, right, that nobody is used to using well. So that is really what drew me to the work and why I love it so much.
Really good point about the money making goal of the choice tech, because the only thing that we are pushed to is either towards buying, either towards feeding the algorithm so that we get the right commercial. I was scrolling my phone and I'm sorry for that, but I'm listening a book now, which is called Careless People, which is written by Sarah Wynne Williams. She was if I remember it correctly, the political liaison for Facebook. And she thought at the beginning when she started to work there that she can make an impact by improving in a good way the way in which Facebook is dealing with political interactions, with dealing with political regimes and so on. And let's say that was not the goal.
Yeah.
A good book.
I haven't read that book. I'm familiar with the story and what you were talking about. Yeah.
Okay, you know it, right? Yeah. It's an amazing book, and it's amazing how good or with which positive attitude she entered that world, and how hard it was for her to enter that world. And for anyone who hasn't read the book, I think it's a full recommendation from both of us. It's a really good book.
Yeah. I like there is so much capacity for how we use these information tools as individuals, as leaders, as kind of the other big bucket of folks I work with as small business people, right? Because they are managing so many information tools that are supposed to make their business run or run into the ground or who knows what, right? And a person's livelihood, especially if they're also managing a small team, right, is incredibly stressful and incredibly important choices that they are making. But I totally lost my train of thought. What are we talking about again?
I love it. I love it because we ran so much that we forgot where we started from. But I love this is the natural flow of discussion that I love. I love it. We started from the mission of Remake the Rules and how we can use the data in the benefit of the user, not in the benefit of the company.
For sure. And like right now, there is a huge power imbalance there. A huge power imbalance, right? And a lot of that is, for me, I think about who is able to take advantage of the technology itself, literally building it, right? But also the skill set around orienting around it, harnessing it, how it's being understood and collaborated with. And I guess I'm just ready to work with folks who are being tremendously impacted by this technology, but not necessarily have as many resources, as many people who just like have their back and are in their court about like, what does this mean for you? Like, how can we really figure out how to live well in this wild new reality that we all find ourselves in, right? And that's what I love doing for folks.
Maybe it's a too direct question, but how do you help someone? Because we have here two different issues, as far as I was able to identify them. One of it is that we have this. We have this data that we provide to the company willingly in our benefit, that is used in our benefit to improve our the things that we see. And the second problem that I also I consider it an even bigger one. We get this these nudges to make the decisions based on the small informations that we get that is slightly nudging us left or right without us even noticing it.
Yes.
And I think that the second one is the biggest issue from my point of view, because you don't realize it when it's happening. what weapons do we have on our side as biped human being without being able to analyze all the data that is provided to us to face this issue or to push this issue away from us?
Yeah. So that issue, I mean, that is one of the huge, huge things that I work with folks on, is making that invisible visible in the decision-making process as folks are trying to use these sort of digital information tools, this choice tech, right? Any tech tools that are going to be impacting the way that we make choices. And I like, essentially the work that I do ends up being, I always center it sort of on whatever practical problem that a person is struggling with at the time. But the work that we do kind of ends up being like 40% practical, maybe, and then 60% existential, as we are like exactly wrapping our heads around what is actually happening when a person is interacting with digital information. How is it pushing and pulling and speaking to you in those ways that maybe are very obvious to you and maybe you have no idea about? And when I work with folks, right, we are kind of doing that together. So I am using my understanding of brains and also of these information platforms to sort of talk folks through this process. Like, when you look at this information, what does it tell you? And based on what you think it tells you, what then are you doing next? But something we also do, and something that everybody can do, when you encounter information and or even just in your daily life, I'll have moments, and I know everybody has these moments, where they will maybe be struck by an anxiety or by a fear. And one of the first things that I do for myself and that I do for clients is ask them where that feeling is coming from and whether or not it is coming from information that has been brought to them and delivered to them, right, outside of their own body, outside of their own experience, or whether or not this is an anxiety and a fear about something that they are literally living through, that their body and brain are a part of experiencing, right? That there is maybe some sort of problem or hurdle or concern that they are living through. And that trying to figure that out, right? Is this part of my in-person embodied lived experience? Or is this just part of this huge wave of information that is sort of being shot at me, right? Like a cannon over and over and over and over again all day long. And that while there still could be a problem, right? Like we get lots of scary information, anxiety provoking information that does get delivered to us. And that doesn't mean that it isn't a problem and that it isn't anxiety provoking, but it is very different about sort of where the problem sits and ergo where the solution to that problem might sit. If that's something that that you can work on as an individual, or if this is something where it is more a conversation about collective action, right, and cultural and societal action.
It's a process, right? It's not something that you can do from today to tomorrow. It's a process because it's we got inside the situations step by step, so it didn't happen at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's impressive that we got this, like you said, these powerful computers, like you said before, to make our life easier, but instead they are, even without us knowing, starting to controlling the way that we think or the way that we take decisions. And that's kind of wrong. Are you able to share a client transformation story? I would be curious. With as less details as possible, but
yeah,
I'm curious.
I think so. Okay, so here's one. one that I kind of am, here's like a transformation that I may be seeing a pattern of, right? Is we'll take it from the perspective of small business owners. What I'm seeing with these folks is just an incredible crush of choice tech that is being like rained down upon them, that is supposed to like fix their business, right? And so there's essentially that they're experiencing this sort of environment where solutions are being brought to them, just like raining down upon them, of all of these software information solutions. And they are being told that without it, in this new environment, right, where there's so much novelty, where there's so much change, that they will absolutely need it to survive. And without it, they will go out of business. And not only that, but it's kind of embarrassing that they don't understand this technology already that literally didn't exist 6 months ago, right? So there's kind of a lot of shaming and uncertainty and just that I think is like pretty unfortunate, right? Pretty mean ways of manipulating these folks into feeling like they need this tool to survive, right? And so kind of one of the roles that I end up playing is essentially just being in that person's corner, right? And they have an expertise, but it isn't in information technology, right? So they're like, I'm just out here trying to be an expert in what I do, but now apparently I also have to be a complete expert in like every operational and administrative software tool that has ever existed, right? Yeah. And so I kind of get in their corner and we really talk about what is and is not happening with their business, what it means for when somebody says that they have an information tool that understands their business better than they do, right? Which is almost certainly not true. And now we can sort of recenter that business owner and in what they are attempting to achieve and what they need to do to actually add stability, get where they need to go, organize their information, whatever it is that they need to do, right? We can re-identify the problem. And so much of actually what I end up doing with folks is identifying the actual problem, because right now it's even hard to understand what the problem is. And we got a lot of information telling us what the problem is, right? Because there's a lot of people who want to sell us the solution to whatever problem they say we have. Yeah.
And if the problem is not there, let's create a problem so that we give a solution for.
So for me, like that transformation for folks is so important because I want to both in that moment, like help them to sort of figure out what the actual problem is, recenter them, give them the tools for managing the sort of deluge of solutions that are coming at them, But then also, the skill set that I'm transferring to people is not as like a data scientist, right? Like not everybody is going to be a data scientist. Like, I don't know, maybe in future generations, everyone's going to have to be, I don't know. But right now, that's not really feasible. That's not the point. But the point is to give people the capacity to better understand what the information is that's coming at them, why it's coming at them, and how to sort of ask questions that will re-empower them in this dynamic, right? So that they can take a little bit more of that control back. They don't maybe need to know everything or understand exactly what this person is talking about, but what we can figure out is whether or not a person is willing to answer their questions, right? And if they're not willing to answer their questions, we have a huge problem on our hands and we probably don't want to talk to that person anymore. Yeah, right. Kind of situations like that. Mm-hmm.
I started this podcast about 5 months ago, and I'm not able to count anymore the amount of SEO experts that contact me to optimize my channel. Mm-hmm. And due to the fact that I have, I'm not saying that I'm an expert in anything, but I have some I have a bit of background of everything that is happening around this. And it's interesting. It fits your description, Emily. That's why I was smiling the whole time, because it fits 100% the description.
Yeah.
Sending me a print screen of a YouTube video with a lot of red arrows, like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, to give you that anxiety, to give you that pressure to take. You have to take decision now, because you are losing a lot of possible viewers that you could have, but you don't have because not optimized. And I'm the expert. I'm the guy. I work with that and that and that, and I cannot believe it's a shame that you don't get the views, because it fits 100% the pattern. And to be honest, I always ask the same question, and it's such an easy question. I always ask, okay, show me your YouTube channel. And then there is nothing afterwards.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. You have a good litmus test. Yeah. And I think too, like, if it all comes down to what the point of this is for you, right? And this is kind of where the recentering comes. Like, is the point for you to invest whatever is necessary to become the, like, whatever, as high a possible viewer rate on YouTube is? Yeah, right. So, like,
I think that's the problem.
Then we can not worry about, right? Because the solutions that are being brought to you, one, they might not do that at all, right? That's kind of a separate question. But that is what they are purporting to do. And you don't even want that, right? So, and there's a lot of sort of that's happening too when I work with folks about that recentering. Like, what is the purpose behind what you are doing? Like, this is about living a life, right? And you get to choose how you get to live it. Are there restrictions? Are there challenges? Absolutely, absolutely. But you should still be empowered to participate in the major decisions of your life, even though a lot of these tools are trying to change that for you.
A few years ago, I read Nudge. I don't know if you know the book. You know it?
I'm familiar.
It was an amazing book, and this was one of the main points from there as well, that you have to know what you want. And yes, sometimes the nudges that you get from, there is a good example comparing the healthcare in U.S. with the healthcare in, I think, in Sweden, if I remember it correctly. Where in U.S. you have to choose your provider. In Sweden, you were automatically assigned to one and you were able to switch. But because of that, the amount of people that registered for Medicare in Sweden was more than the guys registering in the US, because there was nothing active that you had to do. So yes. Let's say, like you said at the beginning, there are good examples and bad examples for sure. But I think it's hard for someone who's a plumber, who's a good plumber. It's hard to navigate this world because he's not able to understand it. Of course, my daily job is helping me and my experience that I got until now, but I think that's a critical point, and I cannot recommend it enough. If someone has an issue, to come to you, because before you pay someone to give you a subscription for the next 2 years for something that you don't need, that someone consult you in that way, because that's a dangerous one.
And one of the most challenging parts too about the time that we're living in is that novelty is not going to slow down anytime soon, right? So, like, even if you can wrap your brain around one of these tools, in order, like, you become an expert in it and then you make a choice about it, right? But 2 years from now, the chances that the tool landscape is totally different is pretty high, right? So it's really more about being able to manage that uncertainty, manage that novelty, than becoming an expert in any one given tool.
And what we have to say, Emily, here is that the small business owners that were sold something, I think there are I don't want to say the happy example, but still not so sad examples as the people in their let's say mid-50s, mid-60s who get scammed by different technical, different social media tricks. There was and I realized it when you said there are always new ideas coming in, because there was a scam that was happening in Romania a few months ago, where they were calling via WhatsApp and just saying that they need a code that they got via WhatsApp because I'm your daughter, I'm your, I don't know, son, and they were holding the WhatsApp account, and then they were taking the possession of the phone and transferring money from the mobile banking apps.
Yeah.
And this is really on a different level, but still somehow going into the same direction. Like, be aware of what you need actually. How can we take control of this algorithm, Emily? How can we make sure that we are not the slaves of it?
I think that is the question, right? Well, the first question is, what is the benefit to me, right? What is the balance here, the comparative? Because, for the folks who are willing, ready, and able to throw away all their electronic devices and go beyond a goat farm, like, more power to you, right? Like, great. But there's a lot of us who are maybe unable or unwilling to fully step away from all of the technology tools at our disposal. And then it just becomes a question of, is this the right choice for me now? Again, understanding that there is going to be quite a lot of uncertainty there, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that is not something that we're ever going to be able to fully get rid of. But it is a kind of a thoughtful question that we can engage with, where, again, we are sort of like recentering ourselves, our goals, what we want, what the cost to us is, and whether or not that is a cost that makes sense for us. And then there you have it.
Do you think it's a good deal to share our data for never?
No, probably not.
I didn't even get to finish the sentence, but I'm fully with you.
Yeah.
There is no benefit in it.
Probably not. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things that I think about a lot and I tend to write about a lot is the way in which we are externalizing, or I'll also say outsourcing, our thinking and our deciding. So it's essentially this idea that we are letting computers, or maybe social norms or whatever, process information for us, like tell us what we should and shouldn't be doing, what is and is not happening, right? And now we're sort of putting a lot of that into digital tools too. So one of the things I'm working on as an example is like this when to rest, right? Like, that feels like it should be a very simple question for us as biological creatures, but it actually is incredibly complicated to figure out when to rest, right? And that's like a long history of why that's the case. And it's certainly, we were not fully just falling down and going to sleep whenever we're tired, right? Before computers were around, right? We have structured sleep for a long time. But now we also have.
I'm sorry for laughing, but it sounds, when you put it like this, it sounds so stupid. I'm sorry.
Wait, which part? Just like laying down and sleeping whenever you're tired? Or
exactly.
Not
no, not doing it. So, like you said, we have to make a rule. No, we don't. Our body is tired, then we go to sleep. It's so easy.
But no, not even close. Not even close, right? And now, even if you have a schedule that allows for that, I feel like there's a lot of cultural pressure, depending on your culture, to not rest even if you have the time to rest, because maybe it's the afternoon or you haven't, checked off enough on your to-do list or whatever, right? Like, it's really complicated now. And now we're sort of putting a lot of our own thinking and processing and decision making into these digital tools that are extracting that data and are making algorithms and are sort of like re-impressing these patterns on us in ways that we don't even know like where it's going to go.
Most probably it's coming to the same conclusion. Whenever you feel tired, go to sleep.
Go to sleep. You're tired? Lay down.
I think in the last period we have a lot of AI. We have a lot of AI usage in taking decisions, but in decision making, that usually was something that we were able to do on our own. The sleeping is one example, but for me the most important ones are the one when we say, okay, because there are a lot of apps that use AI to tell you what you cook today, what you should cook today. That tells that uses AI to tell you, I don't know, how many kilometers should you run today to feel good. What's your take on this?
I think, like, again, to me, like, I don't mean to be too repetitive, but a lot of it comes down to that balance. Like, I think that we're living through an extraordinary era of choice inflation, where people are being asked to make way more choices that are way more taxing, right? So we get in this pattern of exhausting ourselves, this decision fatigue with how many choices we have to make. And that leads us to make poorer and poorer choices because we don't have the energy to make some choices. So really, we kind of have to conserve where we can and where the stakes are low, right? Is how I think about it. So like, what to eat dinner type, low stakes, for me, right? As long as I get fed. But right, how to run my business, what the strategic goals of my company are going to be this quarter, who I'm going to invite into my life. Like, those are questions that are worth conserving energy for in order to make really well, that are worth taking the time and care to really think through and build knowledge and processes for to do really well. So like, I think that there is good potential for help in some decision making, depending on the type of decision, but there is a real potential for it to be very problematic if we're asking for too much help with some of these choices that really we should be taking full control over.
I think we are making ourselves less risk takers because we are afraid to take the decision if we don't have the support of the AI. I think we are getting less street smart because we talked at the beginning about this, getting less problem solving without the help of the internet. I don't know if you know, last week at the beginning of last week, there was a big power outage in the whole Spain and Portugal and part of France. When we think about a situation like this, where we are not able to take our own decisions without our phone, that could be a problem in that case. But of course, to go into the business world, I think that's even a difficult one to ask an AI or try to tell the AI what could be your strategic goal of your company. I don't know if you know the story of the fisherman, which I love. Most probably you know it, but stop me if you do. With the businessman meeting a fisherman coming from he was in holiday, the businessman, and the fisherman was coming back with some midday with a small bag of fish, and said, but where have you been? I was fishing. And why do you come back so fast? Yep, so I usually catch some fish, then I go home, I give them to my wife, she's cooking them, and then we sit around in the house, then we have a glass of wine in the evening, and that's it. But no, do you know the story?
No.
you're doing it all wrong. No, you should stay the whole day to fish so that you are making some more, and then you eat some of them, and then you sell some of them. Yeah, but why? Yeah, because then you, with the money from that you get from selling the fish, you get to buy another boat to hire some more people and do the stuff for you, so that you don't have to do this anymore. Yeah, but why? So that you can stay home and have a glass of wine with your wife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is somehow the world that we are going in now, because we are pushing, and we don't know exactly what we want. And I think the decision making is a big process, and somehow we go around the circle, going the hard way, but ending up having the same decision, actually, the same result.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, right, making complex choices was not easy, was never easy, right? And now we've also added these incredibly powerful digital information tools into the mix, right? This whole landscape of choice tech. And that's right, that's my sweet spot, is this understanding that it's both, that complex decision making was never easy. And there's a lot going on there, from a person's perspective and what they got going on, from their culture, from society, whatever. But then also we're like layering in tons of choice tech, and it's making it even harder.
I think the big benefit of any computing power is to help you in the research process and to show you the variables. And I think the thing that we should not do, we should not let be done by the AI or by the computing power or whomever, is to do the hard part, like to take the decision for us. Because when you have all the information and you are able to get them faster, I think that's something that everyone would do. But to be able to read through those information, I think that's something that we should do on our own.
Yeah, it's like this. I mean, kind of in line with what you're talking about. One of the problems that I see with AI use, or even just conversations around lots of information, is this idealized average, that what is kind of often being brought to you is some sort of average amalgam of the middle, and then that becomes reality, right? And it's really limiting to the variability of what is happening, but also what is possible to happen too, and that is a big problem. And I think where we're seeing some of the best benefit of these AI tools, and where we will continue to see the best benefit, are ones that are built for very specific purposes, because you can actually make them work very well for one thing, right? Like the cancer detection being that example. Like, AI is being built to answer that one question. And if it is done well, if it is done thoughtfully, like, we are seeing that there are positive outcomes there. But the idea that you have sort of like a big, broad tool that can do anything, what it's going to give you is this, idealized average of whatever the data set is that it's pulling from, which we already know is probably going to be pretty problematic because a bunch of humans made it, right? Yeah.
True.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would be one business topic or one cultural social topic that you would try to get the AI completely out of?
My my stance is really about doing it well.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think that humans are very capable of doing things very poorly, as is AI. Right? I mean, they're one and the same, really. Uh, but there are benefits to both. And there are big
True.
downsides to both too. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then we go on both sides. Emily, what's the long-term impact that you hope to have with Remake the Rules?
I just hope to be part of this bigger conversation about what living in the information age means to people and about what living well in the information age can look like. I do hope to have positive impacts on the folks that I work with, but I think that this bigger conversation is something that's going to be really important to pretty much everybody, and I'd hope, at least hope, to be a part of that.
I hope, first of all, I hope that you'll be part of the future decision making process, because you are well intended, and that's not something that's happening in this world anymore. And I think,
thank you, I appreciate that.
That's working you're welcome. Working in the benefit of the people. It's something that we don't do. No, none of the big companies are doing it, because usually there is no profit out of that, and the main goal is money. And after that, it's something that maybe we can do something to cover the money that we made. And I think I really hope that that would be a huge success out of this, because it's you deserve it. I have to say, after this discussion that we had, it was a pleasure for me. But before we wrap it up, I have a small set of rapid fire questions.
Okay. And thank you so much that was incredibly complimentary. I really appreciate it. Thank
you. Thank you. No, that was an honest opinion. Thank you so much, but you're welcome. you earned it. I'm just stating the facts. I haven't had any nudge from any direction.
Okay. That you know of.
Okay, now I'm afraid. Emily, what's one app that you secretly love but you kind of hate?
Reddit.
I saw the same today. Most of my guests are known through Reddit, two different subreddits, but it takes you a lot of time.
Yeah. Whatever. I love people. I find them fascinating. I know we're complicated creatures. Reddit, it's where people go. It's interesting.
I think it's. I was raised and I think you and me both were raised in the period of the forums. You had forums.
Yeah, I was a little a little young, I guess, but yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think Reddit kind of seems the forum-like app again. Mm-hmm. That somehow made me feel, and I love the fact that somehow people are more open because they are anonymous there, and I think that makes them quite easy. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Like, I'm there. I thought about this today.
Reddit. Yep.
What's the less informed decision that you took in your life?
I mean, if I were to tell you that I was like a mature, perfectly capable 17-year-old choosing where to like go after high school, it would be a lie, right? I was a young person who was barely figuring it out. Yeah. And it worked out, thank God. But yeah, I did not know what I was doing.
I love this one, Emily. I love this one because this is something that there is in Germany something which is called a gap year. And usually everybody's taking a gap year, and I don't know if the US is the same, but everyone's taking a gap year. And I think that gap year is the best thing that someone ever invented, to give you the time to, I don't know, work some shitty jobs, to know how hard it is, and then maybe figure out what you like. And even if you don't figure out what you like, to figure out what you don't like then.
Just give your brain another year. Like, at that age, that's a big deal. Yeah.
As far as I heard, it takes until 25 to completely develop the frontal cortex. So that's quite a lot. Yeah, but fully with you. I loved it. What's the best decision you've ever made? Not ever made. Sorry, you've made recently.
Best dish?
Best decision you've made recently.
Decision. I mean, I'm so happy I started Remake the Rules. Like, big risk, and so far, like, medium reward, which is exactly right, you know? Yeah, it's been great.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
It's always the same thing. Lower the expectation, then you are always happy. Always,
for sure.
always.
Yeah, I get to, like, I am the fisherman, and it is great. Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I love it. I need to find my boat. Uh, what's one tech trend you love but still question?
A tech trend I love, but still question all of them. All of them. um, yeah. I'm trying to think of one that I love. I think I maintain a pretty healthy skepticism across the board. But that skepticism does come with the power of positive potential. Yeah. Yeah, not a very satisfying answer. That's what I got though.
No, I did expect something like that. I don't know, a dance trend or something.
I mean,
I'm joking.
always. Like, what
Yeah.
am I? A monster? Give me more dog videos every day, all day, right?
Whomever invented cat videos, I hate that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea that a single person did that. Some artistic genius came up with the idea of the cat video. So.
I mean, it's always the question: what was there first, the egg or the chicken? But it was for sure one video that someone made with a cat, and the other thought, that could be interesting.
Cultural phenomenon.
I like to have scenarios in my head running because this is how I keep myself busy. I love the quote from Sheldon Cooper. Do you know Big Bang Theory?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't watched much, but
Sheldon Cooper is saying, "No, I love to spend time with myself. I never get bored."
good.
What's something you're personally still trying to remake?
I think it is a lifelong process of figuring out who you are, first of all. We humans are very sneaky creatures, and it is amazing what you cannot know about a person, including yourself. And then as part of that, understanding more the forces that are sort of acting upon me and creating me in ways that maybe I don't appreciate, and trying to minimize those in my life too.
Wow, that was a deep one.
Hmm.
That was a really good one. That's I think the hard part for everyone. But the fact that you accept the fact that you accept the fact that those forces are there, I think that's the most important step.
Yeah, just acknowledging it, and then you'll be weeding them out for the rest of your life. Yeah, hopefully.
Any final advice for someone who's feeling overwhelmed or stuck?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember is that all of these choice tech tools, this information technology tools, they are just that. They are just tools. They are not a life. They are not your life. And they are everywhere, and they do have potential, but they don't have to be anything. And that what is most important is who you want to be and how you want to live and what relationship you want to have with these tools, not the other way around.
And it's okay not to be able to handle them on their own. And if you need help to handle those, Emily, where people can find you? I need a
Well,
nice.
yes. Folks can find me, Emily Pabst, at remaketherules.com, my website, and then at Remake the Rules on many social platforms too.
I will link all the social links in the show notes captions, anyhow, on YouTube and Spotify. Emily, I cannot thank you enough for this nice conversation. It was a pleasure to get to know you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
The same for me. And looking forward to the elections episode. I still hold on to
that. All right. We're going to get into it.
Thanks, Emily. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.